Well, thank you, ladies, so much for joining me today for this discussion of a topic that we believe is really important to our faith and our lives because it is part of our lives. It's how we're doing, how we're feeling, our mental state. And I'm really glad to be able to talk with you, sisters, about this. The first question that I have for you, ladies, is what does mental health mean to you? And if I, Nikki, would you be comfortable starting us off?
Sure. So mental health means to me not only my mental being, it includes my physical, my health, physically, um, my personal, just how I interact with people, my personality. Mental health to me means just my whole being, just how I am, my headspace, my just my wellness in general is what mental health means to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I like, as you're saying it, I can tell it's very holistic. You're not like saying, oh, mental health is right here. It's like mental health is here. Mental health is in interactions with others. Mental health is all encompassing.
Right.
Yeah.
Because then it kind of, if your headspace is not right, then it kind of triggers all kinds of other things that don't go well for you. So, you have to have your mind healthy in order to have your whole body and well-being healthy.
Yeah.
So it's important that you keep your headspace your mental status always in check.
Yeah. Deb, I see you nodding. Do you have anything to kind of, explain what mental health means to you?
Definitely piggybacking on what Nikki said, it's pretty much your spiritual, emotional, physical well-being. But for me personally, I would emphasize that taking care of myself so I, in return, can take care of others. Just because I'm more of a nurturing spirit. If I'm not okay, then others around me probably are not going to be okay. Well, as far as like me checking up on them. And just being able to be in the moment and not so much in my head. And knowing that it's okay to ask for help and take a moment to humble yourself if you do need help, because there are people out there able to help you and willing to help you, just not always in the know of how. But it helps for you to take a step and be like, hey, reach out, I need help.
That's awesome. Yeah. I also really like that you said about making sure you're taking care of yourself because you want to take care of others, that your nature is to go and help other people who might be struggling. I've heard a quote that says you can't pour from an empty cup, and it's so true. But we have to be taking care of ourselves and filling ourselves up. So yeah. Janet, let me hear from you. What does mental health mean to you?
I think that they summed it up very well. My sister summed it up very well. But one addition to that I would make would that sometimes it's invisible. How we're doing, how our brain is functioning, how we're processing things isn't always something that you can see. Whereas someone with a physical disability or a broken leg or whatever it might be, you can see that. You can see that that's happening. It's different. Mental health is a little different in that there's not always things that you can see. There's not always symptoms that you can see. So there may be many people, and I try to be mindful of this. There may be many people who are, and I don't know because I can't see it necessarily.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too, to acknowledge that it is something that is an invisible illness, that mental illness is an invisible. And so, with mental health, it's not really something that I love how Deb and Janet, your points that like Deb was saying about, reaching out and asking for help, and Janet saying sometimes it's invisible, so people don't know how you're doing, and that you might be struggling. And so like combining those two things to promote mental health of acknowledging that it's invisible and then reaching out and asking for help. So
Hadassah, can I say that
yeah,
it is actually okay not to be okay?
yes,
It's okay not to be all right, and be able to look for the right resources to communicate that to others. Like, hey, look, I'm not okay. I'm not feeling well, or I'm just not okay.
yeah.
I'm not in a good mental space.
I think that's I love that. I'm so glad you made that, because I think especially as sometimes we feel like we need to validate the fact that we're not feeling okay, that we have to say, I'm not feeling okay because of this. I'm not feeling okay because of whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I really like just saying it's okay not to be okay. And like if you're not okay and you don't really even know why you're not okay, that's still okay.
That's
And
still
that's
okay.
still valid. Yeah. All right. So the next question, and Janet, I'll have you start off this time, is how has your mental health affected you personally or someone that you're close with?
Mental health has affected both myself and people that I'm close. I personally struggled with anxiety and eating disorder in my past. And I know that it wasn't just me going through that. It was also family members that carried a lot of that pain that came along with that struggle of mine. And it was, I made the point of it being invisible in the past because while there were physical manifestations of that disorder that I struggled with, at some point, it wasn't for the whole time that I was struggling. And in fact, for many years prior and many years after treatment, I was struggling, and that was what was going on inside my head and what I was dealing with. So that's what I would say. That's how mental health has affected me in the past. But I certainly would say from that experience, it is, helped me to grow in a lot of ways. It doesn't define me necessarily, but it has helped me learn a lot and have tools, and being able to face the fact that I was struggling, and not ignore that, and kind of release the control that I had a little bit.
Mm. Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. So it's interesting to me hearing, you describe how it like affected you, it affected people around you, and yet like for a while, like you were, it felt like it was just you in it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the time I am always more cautious now as I move forward in the way I speak to other people, because I don't know. I don't know what they're going through. And I want to be some sort of lampstand to them if they are struggling with something similar or slightly different.
Yeah. Is that something that either Nikki or Deb that you feel that you relate to, kind of that quiet, maybe secret struggle?
So I struggle recently. It's been bothersome recently because of the pandemic and the kind of work that I do. So I struggle with things that I deal with at work, and I try not to bring it home, but it really is a struggle to separate the two and leave one at work and not carry it home, particularly at this time. Just struggling with the whole fact of just not bringing home, the virus to my family, the whole struggle of just making sure my whole team that I work with and my family members stay well was a struggle. So, that becomes very telling on you emotionally and mentally, to be able to keep those things separated and then still try to be cheerful and be supportive, like Deb was saying, because, it's hard to be supportive if you're struggling. And I'm also a nurturing soul. So, yeah, it really was bothersome recently for me. And, some days it's harder than others. Some days I'm able to deal with it better. But, it really is a struggle to deal with it.
Yeah.
My circumstances, particularly because of my work.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we get to Deb, Nikki, I want to hear a little bit more about like your work and what that's been like for you, and like how you've dealt with that stress.
So, stress is very difficult. The kind of work I do, I'm a healthcare provider, so people come to me that are not well. So they may be not well physically, mentally. And like Janet was saying, I could see physical things wrong with them, and then I don't see the emotional things wrong with them. But I know they're depressed, and they're struggling. They're asking me for assistance. I'm the person that they're coming to asking, I'm not okay. I'm afraid I may hurt myself. I'm afraid that I may hurt others. I'm afraid that I'm not able to care for my family. I've lost my job. I've lost my health insurance. They just come to you with just a market list of things, that are wrong with them, and you have to be able to keep everything in order and still be able to support them. I may not be able to, and sometimes I'm not able to support all of their needs at that time, because during this pandemic, I've had limited resources in terms of, I physically can't go to a person and say, okay, I'm going to take you to social services. I'm going to take you to your healthcare provider. No, please don't come in the office. I'll have to provide ancillary resources for you. I'll have to have someone contact you. I may have to have a behaviorist contact you. I may have to have your provider contact you, because I can't allow you to come in to the office. Some of the things that you're exhibiting, not only you're telling me you may have some symptoms of what's happening with the virus, but you physically may have something wrong with you that I need to see with my eyes. So in that sense, it's difficult to be able to do that. Some people also don't. They're afraid to share with you because of, I think Janet had mentioned it earlier, the stigma that's attached to certain things that people are struggling with. That they're just kind of like, well, you look okay. Well, what do you mean something's not right with you here?
Right.
Or, you might be afraid to share, because then they'll say, that defines you now, because now you're that thing. You're no longer Janet, you're no longer Nikki or Deborah or Hadassah. Now you're the whatever disorder that you're struggling with. And that's just how people are. And that's just how people's mind work, That's just how it is.
Yeah. Which definitely contributes to not wanting to talk about it. And just, it becomes like this, like
so you keep it
secret. Yeah.
Right. So you keep it. And then when it gets to the point, you make Corinne out of control. And then you have to, you might not be in a position then to say, I need help. People may have to step in to help you and support you, because they're like, wait a minute, something's not right. And it takes it's a very delicate situation to be able to go to that person and say, I don't think something's right, and I think you need help. And for that person then to accept it and say, you know what, you're right. And those are all processes that you'd have to go through in order to, get to the right goal.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes me think about what we were saying earlier of like being someone who's here to listen and here to believe, and with mental, with mental illness. Deb, tell me about this question, how this relates to you.
Well, first, I definitely want to highlight that I appreciate having this platform that you guys have created to express and communicate mental health awareness, because for a long time I had my own misconceptions of mental health, which ultimately affected how I saw my own mental health, and wasn't necessarily aware I needed help until life-changing events happened, and it took my friends and my family and the Christadelphian community to let me know that, hey, you have to, maybe you should reevaluate, re-educate yourself, and then move forward in seeing where I am on a spectrum. It's not necessarily one extreme or the other. It's a spectrum, and putting myself on there, identifying that, yes, I'm not okay, and yes, I would like some help. And pretty much just knowing that there are signs, and you have to trust yourself, even though you don't always know what the signs are. You generally have an idea that you're not officially okay. There are cues, and it took the concern of family, friends for me to get that, because I realized that I wasn't behaving the same way I usually do. I wasn't being my nurturing self, and that was affecting me. And it was sort of like a ping pong effect. I realized that because I'm not acting and behaving the way I usually do, it's affecting the circle around me and thus affecting me back. So it's a chain reaction.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm very glad to hear, like, of the support that having a community like the community that we have, that was such a big part for you, because our purpose in doing this video is to kind of to promote talking about this within the context of what it is to be a person of faith. And that ties perfectly into the next thing I wanted to talk about, is how has, having faith, being, whether it be your interactions with others or it's very much more personal, but how has that impacted your mental health, and your approach to dealing with mental illness?
Well, I would say that the biggest moment of enlightenment, I think, is realizing that mental health goes back as far as biblical times. They were able to get through it, and that gives us a guide, in a sense, that mental health is very much a modern day thing as it was a past historical thing, and that it's okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, say again?
Oh, sorry. I just said it's a human thing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it's it's quite real and very present today. And when in doubt, ask for help, just like they did back then. We should do so today, So I think that's really helped me accept and guide me to understand that, mental health isn't necessarily something to be ashamed of, but very much a real part of human nature. And, the only way to really get through it is to talk about it, ask for help, and, help each other, because there's no sense in just sweeping it under the rug when you can't really face it that way,
Yeah. I like it, because what I hear is that you're saying, like, mental health, and with faith, in the context of faith, it's just that believers throughout, like, all time, from the very beginning of time, have struggled in some way with mental illness, and we see that, and there's comfort in that. Nikki, tell me your thoughts on this question.
So, for me, I think having just a strong faith in God, I have to stay close and structured in terms of holding on to my faith and praying. I pray a lot. I pray. I pray for every circumstance. Mostly my prayers are for strength to be able, and not a big prayer, not elaborate prayer. Most of my prayers are conversations with God, like, God, please just get me through this day. And the next day, I'm praying for the same thing or something similar. I mean, I'm not praying for, any elaborate things. I'm having a conversation with him. I need you to guide me through this. I need you to, and I'm just not always coming to you and begging. If it's an answer where it's no, and I have to just kind of rely on, what I know and what I believe in terms of faith, that's what I have to do. I have to stay grounded in the Word of God. I have to stay in circles where people of similar faith I have conversations with. So I'm not like led astray, or I'm getting outside support or outside guidance. And my circle is very tight in terms of like, my immediate family members, my parents, my husband, some sisters that are in my group, not necessarily in my ecclesia, but people that I know of that I've called and I've said, I need you to pray with me. I need a prayer circle today. I need you today. At lunchtime, are you available to talk to me? Can you pray with me? Can you sing with me? Because for me, that's important. Sing a song with me, sing a hymn with me. We couldn't go to each other's homes. So, call me on WhatsApp so I can see you, so I can talk to you, so I can see all is well, And most of the times going to work, I'm singing, I'm listening to all kinds of, spiritual songs and hymns in the car. I'm talking to my mom, I'm talking to my cousins, I'm talking to friends, just so I can stay grounded and remember that, God is here, God is watching, He's taking me day by day.
Yeah.
And just staying strong, firm in my faith.
Nikki, I love this. It's you were describing what I describe to my clients as a therapist. I describe it as a toolbox, your mental health toolbox.
Yes.
Because I went down the list. You're like, I pray, I remain grounded in scriptures, I gather my ladies and my sisters around me, and I say, give me some help.
Yes.
I reach out. And then I sing.
And I cry, because that's also important. I have to release it sometimes. I have to be like, I don't know what to do. I just need to just cry it out and just work it out. Sometimes I have to do it by myself, and just trust that He's gonna make everything okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, especially with mentioning prayer and kind of crying out to God in these instances, sometimes with other people, sometimes on your own, meditation, like the world recognizes, like society recognizes that meditation has positive health impacts on your mental health. And so, and this is something that's like, oh, wow, isn't that amazing? And yet in our society, people are like, oh yeah, I've started mindfulness. Like, this is something I'm doing now. And for us, we have had this consistent theme, approaching God in prayer, which is literally, that's mindfulness. That's taking time in, thoughtful approach to God. And not only is it just like, bringing attention to what we're thinking, then it's, okay, I'm feeling this way, I'm thinking these things, and now I'm going to include the creator of the universe and get His help on these things, which I just think that's amazing. So Janet, I'd like to hear from you. How has your faith helped you during times of mental illness, like you mentioned?
Well, I think that I love a lot of the things that Nikki and Deb and you mentioned, such as the feelings that you kind of start out with. So, for example, Deb mentioned feeling that shame or feeling ashamed about something, and I think that regardless of what type of mental health struggle you're having, it does start out with those feelings, such as whether it is panic feeling or a chaotic feeling or shame. Personally, I remember just feeling a lot of loneliness. As an example, when I went in treatment as a patient, I I remember feeling sheer loneliness and fear. And having that fear wasn't something that I hadn't been addressing that prior to a treatment and prior to addressing the problem. I was using coping mechanisms. My toolbox wasn't good. It wasn't helpful. But addressing those problems and going into treatment and being able to gather tools and pick up tools and pick up different tips from different people on how to deal with those feelings that I was having was super helpful. But they weren't the most helpful. And the most helpful was my faith. I feeling that loneliness made me turn to God. It really forced me back to God. And I'm so thankful for that, because I realized I looked around, I didn't have my phone. I looked around, I didn't have my family, I didn't have my friends, but I had my Bible. I had that Bible I could crack open. And I just remember drinking in the words of God and being like so grateful that I had that. And I let go of the coping mechanisms that I had before, not immediately, but I began to. And I began to turn to God. And I think of King Hezekiah, how when he learned the news of his health, he turned his face to the wall and he prayed to God. And I think sometimes we need to be taken to that point where we don't have the unhealthy coping mechanisms we used to use, and we just fully turn to God in just desperation. And obviously we wouldn't want someone to get to that point, but I do think that out of anyone, we have such a blessing. Our faith is such a blessing to have that as a tool and to be able to turn to God, the most powerful creator, the only creator, and the most loving Father. He just looks at us as his little lambs. It's so amazing to have that.
Wow. There's so across the three of you, I see this theme of it's my ownership of my faith. Like that there's comfort in saying, like, I went to that anchor to my soul. I went to that sure place. And I think that's really beautiful. And I'm curious now, Janet, you talked about that feeling of loneliness. And first of all, it made me think about Elijah in the desert, and when he's in this time that looks, on all accounts, it looks like it was a depressive season in his life where he was depressed. And his feeling is like, I'm all alone. I've done what God told me to do, and now I am all alone. And we know that a few verses earlier, it says that there were like a 1,000 other believers who had been hidden. And so it's interesting that is such a common experience of just feeling so alone in those moments of sadness. And so my question for you all is, having experienced mental health personally or professionally or in all these different contexts, how can we, like, bringing back to the context of our faith and our interaction with other people of faith, how do you help people not to feel alone, and what was helpful for you in not feeling alone? And I guess I'll shoot that to Janet instead.
Okay. That's a great question, because I do feel as though we're called, if we've struggled with something, to be there for the people who are going to struggle down the line with that. And so one thing I would say that made me feel less lonely was acknowledging that how my amazing Father in heaven views me, to kind of think of him as looking down on me as his precious little lamb in his hand, and picturing that and really walking through that mental image of who God is as our Father. He's so loving. And to read the scriptures, we're told that God gives Elijah comfort, he gives David comfort, and so he can give us that comfort as well. But I think the main thing, as far as how I view my responsibility now, is to talk about what I've struggled with, because then people do come to you and open up. They feel as though there's a door now that that you've opened, that they can go through, and they can talk to you about what they've struggled with. So being frank about our mental health is a great way of making other people feel less lonely. And actually, I think while social media has a way of sometimes being a trigger for a lot of people, it can also be useful in the fact that you can get in touch with people and network and find ways to reach out to people who are struggling.
Nikki, what are your thoughts?
So for me, I always I take ownership of God. He's mine. It's my God. So I kind of selfishly say, well, he's mine. I'm going to share him with you. So here's God. And if they don't know God, or if anybody's struggling with anything and they don't necessarily have a relationship with him, I kind of introduce him to them. Not in an overwhelming sense. I might say, let's pray together, or tell me a little bit about, do you believe in God, and that he is your strength, and that he is someone that you can turn to if you feel too ashamed or too afraid to share it with any other person. So in that sense, I would share him like he's mine with someone. Also, as Janet said, I'm very approachable in a sense where I'm almost like childlike in a sense most of the time. Most of the time, I'm very animated because that's just my personality. I want people to be able to come to me and be able to say anything to me, even come up to me and hug me, ask me for a hug, or just approach me and say, anything you want to say to me. I receive, anything, even if it's something that crushes me or hurts. I'll tell you. I'll be like, well, wait a minute, come on, that wasn't nice, but here I am. I let's talk about this. Maybe this. I'm not in your circumstances. I don't know what you're dealing with, but that's how it affected me. So tell me, how can I help you, or kind of get that person kind of to, share with me in a sense where it's I set boundaries. I definitely set boundaries.
Yeah.
So it's not like I make people just come and do all kinds of things to me or say whatever they want to me, but I am approachable in that sense. So I set boundaries in a sense where it's, I can receive from you and we're going to have a conversation, but there may be a point where I'll say, I cannot help you at this time. I cannot support you at this time because I may not be in a good place to support you because of what you're saying to me. And I may need to gather my tools to be able to help you. But I know for sure most times when I approach a person and I say, do you know God? Let's pray. And then they're okay with that. And then from then it kind of, like you have this, okay,
Relief.
now we can talk.
It's in his hands. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Or it's kind of like they kind of just like back down, like they just like drop their guard and they're just kind of like, okay, so let's talk. Let's have some real talk.
Yeah. I think all of us were smiling when you were saying, about how you are as an open person. We're all like, oh yeah, we know that personally. And I think that's such an incredible quality that you have, Nikki, of making people feel like they can emotionally safe with you. And that, but I really like that you also with that, acknowledgement of that skill that you have, also still saying, but there are boundaries.
Yeah.
And I think as women, sometimes we will push ourselves and put, like Deb mentioned earlier, nurturing to the point where we're like, I can't nurture anymore. And we just feel so like, just like broken, just like we can almost like, I find that I'll find myself feeling resentful. Like, I wish someone would take care of me for once.
Right. Because if you get empty, you're empty.
Yep.
Empty,
Yeah.
like you said earlier, you cannot give from an empty glass. So you're empty. So you need then to fuel up.
Yep.
You know, and you may have to step away from situations in order to fuel up, in order to then be like, okay, I'm okay again.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So not every situation or everything that you can take care of. And that's okay too. I cannot help you. I'm sorry. And you may want to say to that person, you know what? Maybe I can give you Sister Deb, or I can let you talk with. Do you want to call? Do you want to text Sister Agassa? Maybe, you know, I think maybe you have similar personalities or similar things that you may have gone through. And I may ask you that first. Can I share this person with you?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah, I really like that. And I think it's also, again, as women, kind of having this desire to have control. And some of that control means that we take on more responsibility than we are capable of. And we almost put ourselves at our very most extreme, we can kind of put ourselves at the level of God, like, oh, I'm capable of fixing everything. And it's like, oh no, we're not. So Deb, I want to hear your perspective as far as you know, how to help people struggling in this way, and what in your experience has been helpful.
Well, to be honest, I would say I'm still struggling, especially, you know, with recent events with Dad and everything. Being isolated from my fellow brothers and sisters in Christ, and not being able to get out to Bible schools, this Bible class, and Zoom has helped, but I find that even though I have my faith and belief, I'm slipping in the sense of going to God, and almost admire Janet for having that moment where she was forced to go into that corner and, you know, face her fears and just ask, whether it be in panic or last resort, or, you know, just having that need to go there. I'm not quite at that point, but part of me wants to get there, part of me doesn't. But you know, at the same time, I really feel that as a sister in Christ, my responsibility is not being present within the ecclesia and with my fellow brothers and sisters physically has really taken a toll on just my education as a whole, and my contribution and giving glory to God as a whole. So I guess you can say I'm still fighting that battle, and taking ownership that it's been a struggle. And even though I'm on a Zoom, I'm not necessarily present, which has also taken a toll, because I'm aware of it, but I don't necessarily know what to do about it. I don't necessarily know what my tools are that are available, like how to fix it, like having a faith but not necessarily having that spark that used to be there, or you just feel is missing. You know, so I think, just to add a different perspective, I'm still there, and I understand it's okay to be there, and that there's a bit of shame that it is there, but you know, that's why we have these platforms, and you know, I feel vulnerable.
Yeah, I want to commend you. Like, thank you so much for being honest with us here in the space, and saying you're not, you know, it's not going so hot right now. It's not great. It's really hard. I feel like it's so easy to put on a facade and to act as if, you know, everything's great. Like I'm doing well. I'm helping the community. I'm like doing all these great things, and yet, like, I assure you, Deb, that everyone in this video call right now has something that is really painful. And I think that you especially right now have something, you know, really painful, and we share with you in that pain. And you know, we love you so much. And the fact that you're here right now is an answer to this, you know. It's you saying, this is what I do to help. I share that I'm not okay. And in doing that, I say to Hadassah, I say to Nikki, I say to Janet, you are safe to tell me if you're not doing okay too. Because I will open myself up in this way, and you can do that too. And yeah.
If I can interject also,
Yeah.
I think it should be okay that if friends and family notice that you're not okay as well, that, you know, they can approach you and let you know, hey, I've noticed a few things that don't seem quite right.
Yeah.
Are you okay?
Wow. And how would you encourage someone who is struggling to listen to that when someone comes? Because sometimes it can be easy just to kind of brush it off when you don't really want people to know necessarily. How can someone accept that help?
It's actually interesting. I'm sort of in that scenario right now where I myself need help, but have found another acquaintance who is in need of help. And I was that person that noticed something wasn't right, but wasn't quite sure how to approach it or be there for them. Like I had no idea, but I found that just listening is enough, you know. And once you listen and you just be present in the moment with that person and share that person's moment, like Nikki said, you know, you may not be able to provide help, but at least you've listened and you're one more person in that person's tool bag to, you know, resource out and be like, hey, maybe you should try this or maybe you should try that, you know. So I don't know if that answered your question. I got on a tangent.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, that's a great answer. And actually, it's interesting because there's a study that was done that they use these different methods of providing some support for someone who was struggling in whatever way. And I forget the other two, but it was three different methods, and one of them was to use empathetic and reflective listening. So to basically say if you say, I'm having a hard day, and then Nikki says, oh, it sounds like this has been a tough time for you, or something like that. Even it sounds kind of like, oh, what? Of course, you know, she just repeated what she said. But actually, for a lot of people, it is really healing. And that was the area of the study that had the most success, was when people felt they were really listened to. And so often, and I think this is as women, but as people in general, we have this desire to have an answer, or to have some sort of way to help, like some sort of way to give like a practical, here's something that might help you, here's something, and just listen. Like just take the time to really listen and to say, am I understanding correctly what you're saying? Is it this? Is it this? You know, that can be hugely helpful for people. But I want to hear from Janet. I saw you unmuted, so we're going to go with Janet. Of what are ways that for you have, like, how would you encourage someone to accept help?
Just to add to what you were talking about as well before about listening, I think I heard a term recently, probably from you or from someone else, maybe a video, where it was about holding space for someone, and the idea being that if someone is in need, you are taking that like physical space and emotional space to just hold them and hear them, dedicate yourself in listening to them, not with any intention of making any response to them or fixing their problems, or, oh, I have this great idea, let me try to give this to you. truly just holding that space. So I wanted to add that on. For the people that, just to clarify, did you ask, can you ask your question again?
How would you encourage someone to accept help?
I think that to a certain extent, it can be kind of complicated because a lot of the time people they're not enjoying themselves, of course, but to a certain extent, they're holding on to the coping mechanisms that they have right now. And so in a sense, it's almost wanting to keep their struggles almost a secret so that they continue dealing with it how they're dealing with it. But I think that Deb mentioned a little while ago that if you're not doing okay, you can kind of trust yourself and go with that instinct and talk to yourself and say, do I really want to feel this way? Walk through it, walk through that mental kind of battle for a little bit. Not that it's something you can just change on a whim, but do I really want to be coping this way anymore? And be honest and really come to terms with that answer. And then I think once you get to that point, you might even be a little bit willing to allow someone into your space and share. But it's scary. And I'm not saying that it's not scary, because it's very scary to share that with people because you don't know how they're going to react. You don't know. Sometimes it's almost as if you're more concerned about what their reaction is. So I'm here, if anyone, like, I'm so glad we have this platform because we can be honest. But if there was anyone listening to this that felt like they couldn't talk about it, hey, look, we're all here. Now's the time to get help, and now's the time to ask for help. I know it's hard, but you're not alone. And I think that's the message that I always try to like spread, is that it feels lonely, but you aren't alone, and we love you. And sending that message is I think very freeing for a lot of people.
Yeah. Nikki, do you have any thoughts you want to add to this?
Sure. So you can't, if I make sure I understand the question properly. So you can't force anyone to ask for help or to get help. There has to be some readiness associated with it. So I know too that, you may be in a position to help the person get ready or point out certain things to the person that you see is wrong, like that was mentioned earlier. I see so and so, like, you're not coping well with this, or you're not coping well with that. Is that something that you're feeling? And kind of turn it around on that person to see if they're and it's kind of like a checklist. Are you ready? Are you at the point? You have to be at the point where you're ready for some help. If somebody's asking you, or you see somebody that's careening out of control. But if you're the person, you also, like Janet said, you have to be ready, or in the space to receive that kind of response from someone, to say, yeah, I realize that you're not okay. And for that person to say, yes, I'm not okay. And where do we go from here? What do we do now? What resources we have? What do we do now? That's the biggest thing to get to that point.
Yeah,
I think.
Thank you, Nikki. So this is a question about what do you think is important that our faith community know about mental illness and mental health? And I'm going to start it off this time with Nikki.
So, not because we believe in God that we're just not also human to have needs in terms of not being well mentally. So for our community to know is, and sometimes we're really tough in a sense that we just kind of sum people up. You look at people and you sum them up. You're like, what's wrong with her? She's odd, or she's strange, or she's behaving strange, and not realizing that somebody's going through something. Particularly like Deb. Deb's going through a whole grieving process right now with what's happened to her and her family. And Janet went through that with what she was dealing with. So you look at that person and you just sum them up. You're like, she's odd, or she doesn't look like she's right, or we're quick to say she's crazy. I don't think she responds properly. She doesn't behave well. Then you kind of label people like, well, that's not normal. You should not be in a position to say this is normal and that's not normal. That might be normal for that person, and like you learn as a small child, if you don't have anything productive that you're going to approach that person and say, you need not to say it. You need to stay out of that person's way, because then you can be a problem for that person, or then push that person out of control, or just cause them more harm than anything. So it's important for our faith, for people to know, brothers and sisters, to know, if you see somebody and you think something's not right, if you're not in a position to step in and help, even to sit down and just hold their hand, pray with them, touch them. You want to talk, make yourself ready and say, when you're ready, I'm here. Sitting here, I'm ready. When you're ready, come. Just not, just look at that person and judge and say, this person's not right, if you're not in a position to help. That's how I feel.
That's it. I really like that point of not summing someone up in just one quick look and then, oh, this is what that is. Deb, can I shoot this question over to you? What do you think is important for a community of believers to know about mental health and mental wellness and illness?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. I would say most important things for the faith community to know about mental health, I would say, one, definitely educate ourselves, because even, I was in the human service field in college, and, you would think that being in that major in college, I would have been more aware of mental health awareness and, what it is and the spectrum of it. But I wasn't. I'm still learning and realizing that it's not one extreme or the other. It's a process, It could be small things. Well, it's not small, but things as far as anxiety or disorders, and there's a whole spectrum. And so I think we should really try to educate ourselves on it, and how we can help, how we can be aware. If anything, at least try to provide some resources and tools for anyone who may feel they can come and open up to you and be in that safe space. Because I think, like Nikki said, if you don't have anything proactive to say, it could be potentially very damaging to the person and send them in a spiral, So I think just educate and be proactive and aware for sure.
I think that's such a good point. It's like, everyone's heard about some like very, surface level mental health stuff, like everyone knows to a certain extent. So to actually kind of really, educate yourself, I that's a great point. Janet, kicking it over to you.
I think that educating is key, and I think that's a great point. I'm glad Deb brought that up. And then not only that, and moving forward and talking about the things you've learned within the community, even if it means brothers talking about these things in relation to the scriptures, and talking about mental health within those lessons, and how our faith is associated with that. Because I think a lot of the time, within the community, it's there is a stigma, and then there may be so much of a stigma for some people that they remove themselves from the community because they don't feel that this is a place where they can talk. And I that's a general statement, but I do think it's important to have this be a space where we can, bring our brokenness, and share and learn together about mental health. The other thing I would say is, personally, I'm very much a believer in seeking help, whether it be through group counseling or one-on-one therapy, and that we try and work on removing that stigma as well. I know many people. I had a brother recently tell me that therapy was very helpful for him, and I think that we be honest about how much of a guide that can be. God is our savior. He is our Father, and Christ is our Savior. And there's resources available that I really believe are God-given, that we can accept that help.
Well, I'm so glad that you said that, because I was going to say that, but I'm a therapist, so people think I'm biased. Nobody takes me seriously. So I'm so grateful for each of you and for these very practical tools that you provided in this video, as far as, individually, things that can be done to add to your toolbox to take care of your mental health. We've talked about that. We've talked about helping people who are also struggling with mental illness. And then lastly, we've ended on this call to ourselves to take time to listen and to be present and to really, hear what's going on for people. And also to seek professional help. If you need professional help, seek it, because, mental illness is, like Deb mentioned, it is on a spectrum. And there are things that individuals within the Ecclesia can help and be such a good support with. And then there are things where it's, it is serious, and it is an illness. And I'm a fan of seeking therapy even before it gets to that point, and combining different options, because we have so many tools. We have, fundamentally, before anything else, we have our faith, and then built on that, we have, our connections with good relationships and good friendships. And then we also have people who are qualified to help us, and that have spent years studying, what it is to not be mentally well, to struggle in that way. So I just want to say thank you to each of you for taking this time to open up and to be vulnerable and to share the skills that you have, and most of all, to show other sisters and other women watching this video that it is okay not to be okay.